Caleb Warren was following buzzard circles in the Nevada desert when he discovered something that would haunt his dreams for years to come. An abandoned wagon with a woman tied to its side like cargo, barely conscious under the scorching sun. And burned into the weathered wood above her head was a single word that made his blood run cold: property. When he cut her loose and she collapsed into his arms, the first words she whispered through cracked lips weren't "thank you" or "help me," but "please don't sell me back to them." What followed would challenge everything Caleb thought he knew about justice, redemption, and whether two people broken by the cruelest aspects of humanity could find healing in each other. But to understand how a woman branded as property became the salvation of a man who had lost faith in goodness, I need to tell you about the day Caleb Warren's world changed forever in the middle of nowhere. Caleb had been riding the boundary of his ranch for 3 days, searching for missing cattle that had wandered off during the drought of 1889. At 35, he'd spent the last 12 years building a modest but successful spread in the high desert of Nevada, far enough from civilization that he rarely saw another human being for weeks at a time. He preferred the solitude. After what he'd witnessed during his 5 years as a U.S. Marshal, Caleb had lost most of his faith in humanity and found peace only in the honest work of ranching, where problems could be solved with hard labor, and where the worst evil he encountered was an occasional cattle rustler or coyote threatening his herd. The buzzards had been circling for 2 days, their black shapes wheeling against the harsh blue sky in a pattern that suggested something large had died in the desert. Caleb had seen enough death to recognize the signs, and he rode toward the disturbance with the grim resignation of a man who knew he'd probably find the remains of one of his missing steers. What he found instead challenged every assumption he'd made about the limits of human cruelty. The wagon sat in a shallow depression between 2 red rock formations, its paint blistered and peeling from years of desert sun. One wheel was broken, and the canvas cover had been shredded by wind and weather, leaving only tatters flapping in the hot breeze. At first glance, it looked like any of the dozens of abandoned wagons that dotted the western trails, relics of families who had given up on their dreams of California gold or Oregon farmland and had simply walked away from everything they couldn't carry. But as Caleb rode closer, he realized that this wagon was different. Someone was still with it. A woman sat propped against the wagon's side, her wrists bound with rope that had been tied to iron rings bolted into the wood. Her head hung forward, and her long dark hair fell across her face like a curtain, but he could see that she was breathing, though barely. She wore what had once been a simple brown dress, now faded and torn from exposure to the elements. Her feet were bare and bloody, suggesting she'd walked a long distance before being tied to this wagon and left to die. But it was the word burned into the wood above her that made Caleb's hand move instinctively to his gun. Property was branded into the wagon's side in letters 6 inches tall, created with a hot iron that had charred the wood black and deep. Caleb dismounted and approached slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel and scattered bones of small animals that had died in this desolate place. The woman didn't lift her head at the sound of his approach, but he could see her shoulders tense, as if she were preparing for another blow. "Ma'am," Caleb said quietly, stopping several feet away. "Ma'am, I'm here to help you." She raised her head slowly, and Caleb felt his chest tighten when he saw her face. She couldn't have been more than 25, with high cheekbones and dark eyes that held depths of pain he recognized from his own mirror. But it was the brand on her left cheek that made him understand exactly what kind of horror he'd stumbled upon. A small letter M had been burned into her skin, marking her as surely as if she were livestock. "Please don't sell me back to them," she whispered, her voice so hoarse it was barely audible. "I'll work for you. I'll do anything you want. Just don't take me back to the auction." Caleb felt rage build in his chest like a wildfire as he knelt beside the woman and began cutting the ropes that bound her wrists to the wagon. The fibers were stained with blood where she'd struggled against them, and her hands were swollen and discolored from restricted circulation. "Nobody's going to sell you anywhere," he said firmly, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You're safe now." When the ropes fell away, she collapsed forward, too weak to support herself. Caleb caught her carefully, noting how light she was, how her ribs showed through the torn fabric of her dress. She'd been starved as well as tortured. "What's your name?" he asked gently as he lifted her into his arms and carried her to the shade cast by his horse. "They called me 23, she whispered. "That was my number at the auctions. I don't remember my real name anymore." Caleb set her down carefully against a boulder and offered her water from his canteen. She drank desperately like someone who hadn't had clean water in days, and he had to stop her from drinking too much too fast. "Easy," he said. "Small sips, or you'll make yourself sick." As she drank, Caleb examined the wagon more closely, looking for clues about who had done this to her. What he found made his blood run even colder. Built into the wagon bed were iron shackles and chains, clearly designed to hold multiple people. The wood was stained with what could only be blood, and scratched into the sides were dozens of tally marks. As if someone had been keeping count of human cargo, this wasn't just an abandoned wagon. It was a transport vehicle for human trafficking, probably used to move kidnapped women and children to illegal auction sites throughout the territory. "How long were you tied to this wagon?" Caleb asked, returning to the woman's side. 3 days, I think. Maybe 4. The sun makes it hard to tell." She looked up at him with eyes that held a mixture of gratitude and terror. "Are you really not going to take me to an auction?" "I give you my word," Caleb said solemnly. "No one is ever going to sell you again." She began to cry then, not the dramatic sobbing of grief, but the quiet, steady tears of someone who had finally allowed herself to hope. "They said no one would ever help me because I was marked," she said, touching the brand on her cheek. "They said I belonged to them forever, and that any decent person would return me like lost property." Caleb felt his jaw clench. Well, they were wrong about that. Over the next hour, as the woman slowly regained some strength from the water and hardtack biscuits Caleb carried in his saddlebags, he learned the basics of her horrifying story. She'd been kidnapped from a small town in Colorado 2 years earlier, snatched from the street while walking home from her job as a seamstress. She'd been sold to a man named Marcus Thornfield, who ran what he called finishing schools for young women, but which were actually training facilities where kidnapped women were broken and prepared for sale to wealthy men throughout the West. Thornfield brands his girls so they can always be identified and returned if they escape, she explained, unconsciously touching the M on her cheek. He has buyers from California to Texas, men who pay premium prices for women who've been properly trained. Caleb had heard rumors of such operations during his years as a marshal, but had never encountered one directly. The scope and organization of what she was describing made him realize he'd stumbled onto something much larger and more horrific than random kidnapping. "How did you end up tied to this wagon?" he asked. "I tried to escape during transport to a buyer in California. I managed to get away during a storm, but they caught me after 2 days. This was my punishment." She gestured toward the wagon. "They said they were going to leave me here until the sun or the coyotes finished me off, as an example to the other girls about what happens when you try to run." How many other girls? There were 12 of us in the group being transported. I don't know what happened to them after I was left here. Caleb made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "What would you say if I told you I could help you get those girls back?" She looked at him with surprise. "You do that for strangers?" "I was a U.S. Marshal for 5 years before I became a rancher. I know how to track criminals, and I know how to fight." Caleb's voice carried the cold determination of a man who had found a purpose worth risking everything for. "But first, we need to get you somewhere safe and get your strength back." "I don't have anywhere to go," she said quietly. "Even if we could rescue the others, women like us, we're marked now. No decent town will want us." Caleb stood up and extended his hand to help her to her feet. "Then you'll come to my ranch. It's not much, but it's safe, and it's yours for as long as you need it." She stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment, as if she couldn't quite believe that someone was offering her genuine help without expecting something in return. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you risk your life for someone like me?" Caleb thought about his years as a marshal, about all the times he'd arrived too late to help the victims of men like Thornfield, about the guilt that had driven him to seek isolation in the desert. "Because maybe this is why I found you," he said simply. "Maybe this is what I was supposed to do with the skills I learned." The journey to Caleb's ranch took 2 days, with frequent stops to allow the woman to rest and regain her strength. Caleb had fashioned a makeshift saddle pad from his bedroll so she could ride his spare horse, but years of abuse and starvation had left her weak and unsteady. On the first night, as they camped beside a small spring hidden among the red rocks, she spoke for the first time about her life before the kidnapping. "I think my name was Anna," she said quietly, staring into the small fire Caleb had built. "Anna something. I remember a woman calling that name, and it felt like it belonged to me." Caleb looked up from the coffee he was brewing. "Anna's a good name. Would you like me to call you that?" She considered this for a long moment, as if testing how the name felt in her mind. "I'm not sure I'm still the person who was Anna. Too much has happened. Too much has changed. Maybe you're not the same Anna you were before," Caleb said carefully, "but that doesn't mean you can't be a new Anna, one who gets to decide who she wants to become." That night, Caleb kept watch while Anna slept, and he saw how even in sleep she remained tense and ready to flee. She startled awake at every small sound, her hand instinctively moving to cover the brand on her cheek. The second day brought them to Caleb's ranch, a modest operation built around a sturdy adobe house with thick walls designed to stay cool in summer and warm in winter. Anna stood beside her horse, looking at the simple homestead with wonder. "It's so quiet," she said. "I'd forgotten that places could be quiet." Caleb helped her down from her horse and led her toward the house. "It's not much, but the walls are thick and the doors have good locks. You'll be safe here." Inside, Anna moved through the rooms like someone exploring a foreign country. She touched the simple wooden furniture, the books on Caleb's shelf, the clean dishes in his kitchen, as if she couldn't quite believe that such ordinary domestic peace existed. "You can have the bedroom," Caleb said. "I'll sleep in the main room." "You couldn't take your bed," Anna protested. "The bed hasn't been used in over a year," Caleb replied honestly. "I've been sleeping on the couch since I started having trouble with nightmares." Anna studied his face, recognizing something familiar in his expression. "What kind of nightmares?" Caleb hesitated, then decided that honesty was the foundation any trust between them would need to be built on, the kind that come from seeing too much evil and not being able to stop it all, the kind that make you wonder if there's any goodness left in the world. "And do you think there is goodness left in the world, I mean?" Caleb looked at her, this woman who had endured unimaginable horror, but still had enough humanity left to worry about taking his bed, and felt something shift in his chest. "I'm starting to think there might be," he said. Over the following weeks, Anna slowly began to heal, both physically and emotionally. Caleb gave her space to recover while providing the basic necessities she needed: clean clothes, regular meals, medical attention for the wounds and brands that marked her body. But it was the small kindnesses that seemed to affect her most deeply. When Caleb knocked on doors before entering rooms, when he asked permission before moving her belongings, when he consistently kept his word about even minor promises, Anna began to remember what it felt like to be treated as a human being rather than property. "You don't have to ask my permission to use your own kitchen," she told him one morning, when he asked if she minded him starting breakfast. "Your comfort matters more than my convenience," Caleb replied simply, and Anna felt tears spring to her eyes at the casual way he spoke about her feelings as if they had value. 3 weeks after her rescue, Anna approached Caleb with a request that surprised him. "I want you to teach me to shoot," she said, "and to fight and to track. I want to learn everything you know about being a marshal." Caleb set down the harness he'd been mending. "Why?" "Because 12 girls are still out there, somewhere, probably suffering the same things I suffered or worse. And because I'm the only one who knows what Thornfield looks like, how his operation works, where he might take them." Anna's voice grew stronger with each word. "I can't live with myself if I don't try to help them." "It'll be dangerous," Caleb warned. "Thornfield has men, money, and connections. Going after him won't be like tracking down ordinary cattle rustlers." "I know," Anna said, "but I also know that if we don't stop him, he'll keep destroying lives until someone does. And maybe helping them is how I become someone I can live with being." Caleb studied her face, seeing determination there that reminded him of the idealistic young marshal he'd once been, before cynicism and failure had driven him into isolation. "All right," he said finally, "but we do this the right way. You learn everything I can teach you, and we plan this mission carefully. I won't have your rescue turn into another tragedy." Anna smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Caleb had seen from her since he'd found her tied to that wagon. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for saving me, for giving me a place to heal, and for believing I can be more than what they tried to make me." As Caleb began her training the next morning, teaching her to handle a rifle with the same patience he'd once used to gentle wild horses, he realized that Anna's rescue had saved him as much as it had saved her. For the first time in years, he had a purpose that went beyond mere survival. 6 months later, Anna moved through the shadows outside Marcus Thornfield's compound with the silent precision of a ghost. Every skill Caleb had taught her now honed by months of relentless practice. The woman who had once been branded as property now carried herself like the predator she had trained to become. And when she signaled to Caleb from her position near the main building, he felt a fierce pride in how completely she had reclaimed her strength. The compound was exactly as Anna had described it, a series of buildings disguised as a legitimate ranch, but with barred windows and reinforced doors that revealed its true purpose. Through careful reconnaissance over the past month, they had confirmed that Thornfield was holding 19 women and girls, ranging in age from 15 to 25. "Remember," Caleb whispered into the speaking tube they'd rigged between their positions, "we get the girls out first, evidence second, justice third. No heroics that risk innocent lives." Anna's response came back clear and determined. "Understood," moving to the dormitory building now. Caleb watched through his field glasses as Anna picked the lock on the side door with tools he'd taught her to use, skills he'd learned during his marshal days when legal warrants weren't always sufficient to save lives. She disappeared into the building, and Caleb began counting the minutes until her signal. Inside the dormitory, Anna found herself face to face with the nightmare she'd escaped 6 months earlier. 12 women sat or lay on thin mattresses, their faces bearing the same empty despair she remembered from her own captivity. Some bore fresh brands, others showed signs of recent beatings, and all of them looked at her with the terrified resignation of people who had learned that any change usually meant more suffering. "I'm here to get you out," Anna whispered to the closest woman, a girl who couldn't have been more than 16. "My name is Anna, and I was here 2 years ago. I escaped, and now I've come back for you." The girl's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and disbelief. They said no one ever escapes permanently. They said they always bring you back. "They lied," Anna said firmly, beginning to pick the locks on the girl's shackles. "There's a man outside named Caleb who used to be a U.S. Marshal. We're going to get you all out of here tonight, and then we're going to make sure Thornfield never hurts anyone again." Working quickly and quietly, Anna freed 11 women while explaining the escape plan in whispers. But when she reached the 12th cell, she found it empty, except for a note pinned to the wall. "Your friend came back for you. How touching. Come to the main house if you want to see her again." Empty. Anna felt her blood turn to ice. Somehow, Thornfield had captured Caleb. "Get them to the horses," Anna told the oldest of the freed women, pressing a gun into her hands. "There's a rope line running from this building to the edge of the property. Follow it, and you'll find horses and supplies waiting. If I'm not there in 30 minutes, take the others and ride for the town of Meridian. Find Sheriff Wilson and tell him Marshal Caleb Warren sent you." "Where are you going?" the woman asked. "To get my partner back," Anna replied, checking her weapons with grim determination. The main house was lit up like a celebration, and Anna could see Thornfield's silhouette in the front window. She approached from the back, using every technique Caleb had taught her about moving unseen and striking without warning. Inside, she found Caleb tied to a chair in Thornfield's office, conscious but bleeding from a head wound. Thornfield himself stood behind the chair, a gun pressed to Caleb's temple, smiling with the satisfied expression of a man who believed he held all the advantages. 23, Thornfield said when Anna appeared in the doorway. "You've grown bold since you left. My care, and you've learned some interesting skills." "My name is Anna," she replied calmly, her own gun trained on Thornfield's chest. "And I've learned that monsters like you only have power when people are too afraid to fight back." "You won't shoot me," Thornfield said confidently. "If you do, your martial friend dies too." Anna smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Thornfield's confidence waver. "You're right, I won't shoot you, because shooting would be too quick." In one fluid motion, Anna threw her knife with deadly accuracy, the blade embedding itself in Thornfield's gun hand and causing him to drop his weapon with a scream of pain and surprise. Before he could recover, Anna was across the room, her gun now pressed to his forehead. "The difference between us," Anna said quietly, "is that you hurt people because you enjoyed their powerlessness. I'm going to hurt you because justice demands it." What followed was Thornfield's complete confession, extracted with methods Anna had learned both from Caleb's martial training and from her own intimate knowledge of what true powerlessness felt like. By the time Sheriff Wilson arrived with federal marshals, they had enough evidence to dismantle Thornfield's entire network and locate victims who had been sold across 3 territories. Thornfield himself was sentenced to hang, but died in prison before the execution could be carried out, killed by inmates who had learned about his crimes and decided to deliver their own form of justice. A year later, Anna and Caleb stood together at the dedication of the Safe Haven Ranch, a sanctuary they had established for women escaping situations like the one Anna had survived. Funded by the bounty money from dismantling Thornfield's operation and donations from grateful families, it provided not just shelter, but training in practical skills that would allow survivors to build independent lives. "Do you ever regret it?" Anna asked as they watched a group of women learning to ride horses in the corral Caleb had built. Giving up your quiet life to take on all this responsibility? Caleb looked at her, this woman who had transformed from a broken victim into someone who was literally saving lives, and felt his heart swell with an emotion he'd thought he'd lost forever. "Never," he said. "Finding you didn't just save your life, Anna. It saved mine too." 6 months later, when Anna became Anna Warren in a small ceremony attended by the women they had rescued and the families they had reunited, the brand on her cheek had faded, but never completely disappeared. She kept it as a reminder, she told Caleb, not of what she had survived, but of what she had overcome. The word property that had once been burned into the wagon where Caleb found her was now carved into a wooden sign that hung over the entrance to their ranch, but with one crucial addition. It now read, "Property of no one," a promise to every woman who found sanctuary there that her life belonged to herself alone. If this story of survival, justice, and healing touched your heart, and reminded you that even the most broken people can become forces for good in the world, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that trauma doesn't have to define us forever. What's your most powerful story of someone who turned their pain into purpose to help others? Share it in the comments below. Your experience might inspire our next video. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful form of healing comes from ensuring that others never have to endure what we survived.